Is so exciting. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Just Talking with Ayesha Dami Migueda and myself. I can't even do that. I want to start by, again, I got all dressed up this week, but this is Wolf Electric, who is our community partner for the Toronto Miracle this weekend. And why am I talking about that? Well, first of all, I cannot move. My whole body hurts. And Aisha's got a little bit of aches and pains too. So we're just going to call this the seniors moment, right?
The seniors edition. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So the reason I'm starting with Toronto Miracle, and I'm about to just pass this off to Ayesha, is that this week and next week, we're going to be talking about limiting beliefs from both sides of the coin. And the reason I'm starting with the Toronto Miracle is because myself and my co-captain, Tanya, last year, the first year we did it, we brought in 832 items, something like that, maybe close to 9 by the time that it finished. And we were like, okay, so you know what? Let's set a goal of 1,000, which is aiming pretty darn low. Needless to say, when we hit a grand total this week, this wonderful community, 4,420 food items or items, toilet paper, shampoo, people need everything. I was in tears. I was in tears because it blew my mind. Why is this story starting this topic? Well, that's because why did we aim it for 1,000? Why were we going here when we ended up way up here? But why couldn't we go like 2,000, stretch it? And really, if you ask, it's because, well, what if we don't get there? And that would have been the heartbreak. And that's going to be what I'm going to lead up to. I'm going to pass it off to Ayesha to take this and add a little bit more flesh to it. But this is the challenge with limiting beliefs and how they affect us. Are we shooting for the stars? You shoot for the moon, you at least end up in the stars. Or do we just go, okay, well, what's the bare minimum? That's what I'm going to start with this week. Take it away, Ayesha.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. And Gwen, congratulations on the food drive. That's amazing. You guys did a great job, and congratulations to your community for really pulling together, because that's fantastic. But I think that's a great example to start with in terms of limiting beliefs. So for people who aren't familiar, limiting beliefs is something that is a bit of coach speak. It's something that we talk about when we're talking about any kind of attitude or any kind of belief system that we have that keeps us stuck in one place, or it doesn't allow us to actually think beyond what is our comfort zone or what is normal to us or what is safe to us, right? So Gwen used that example of what happens if we don't get there, right? That's unsafety, that's failure, that's disappointment, right? So what we want to do over these 2 weeks, and especially leading up to the holidays, is to have you think about what your limiting beliefs are, or what narrative you've created in your life in terms of how you engage things, how you deal with people, especially with the holidays coming up and people dealing with family situations that sometimes are not very pleasant. We have stories that we tell ourselves. We'll say things like, I can't handle this person, or this is too much for me, things like that, right? And how do we move beyond that kind of self-talk, because that's really negative self-talk, and that's self-talk that enforces or reinforces limiting beliefs. So what we want to do is we want to think about how do we untangle that, and how do we empower ourselves to be able to move forward in a more empowering way, or in a way that allows us to be strong and to be resilient and to use the skills that we actually do have. So when you use a statement like, I can't do this, or this is too hard, then it's actually, and coming back to the kind of communication things that we were talking about over the last few weeks as well, is it's actually not true. It's actually a lie that we tell ourselves, because there's so many examples that we can think of situations that are equally as challenging or possibly more challenging that we actually are able to deal with and move through with resilience. Can you think of any examples for you, Gwen, of something like that that's happened?
Oh my goodness, I could give a boatload, because the one thing is, like, in the trauma world, and it's interesting how the same terms are used in different contexts, right? As you said, it's coach speak. In the trauma world, what we call that is also a disconfirming event. That,
Mm-hmm.
you might say something, and then what is something that proves that what you say is not right? And the best example for me was running. When I first started running, this is, many years ago, and I know I'm still going through this now when I'm trying to get back to the fitness levels, because it is harder now. But when I started running and we came to a big hill, one of the big things is, if I look up and I see that there's this huge hill in front of me, it's like, oh my God, I'm never going to get up there. I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm going to have to stop. And there were times at the beginning where I did have to stop. But what I did instead was not focus on where I was going. I just focused on my feet. And I just said, okay, one more, just one more, just one more. So literally, instead of focusing on that limiting belief, I literally said, okay, I don't like that narrative. I don't like that story. When I look up there, I don't like the story. Instead, I'm just going to look at my feet. I'm going to look at my feet and go, okay, one more. Can you do one more? I can do one more. Can you do one more? I can do one more. Until all of a sudden, now keep it in mind that every once in a while you need to look up to go, okay, I'm making some headway. But mostly it's looking down, because that was allowing me to get propped up and get that continuing disconfirming belief that it's like, yeah, nope, I'm still going. I can still do one more. I can still do one more. I can still do one more. And then as you do that, you're literally removing those limiting beliefs right in front of you. Now, did it hurt? Yeah. But then you get to the place where all of a sudden you look up at that hill and that's no longer a thing, because you focused on your feet. So that would be, again, I know everything I talk about comes back to sports, but that's one of the analogies when we use our body, and it's a lot stronger than we think it is. But we do have to start, and we have to be gentle and pushing at the same time. So I love the way that you said, being able to, that it's a limiting belief because it's a narrative. It's a story that we're telling ourselves. So why don't we tell the story that, again, why did we say 1,000? Why didn't we say, okay, let's double that. Let's at least aim for 1,500. That'll be a success. And then anything past that is a success, right? But even if you don't get there, even if you did have to stop before you got to the top of the hill, how much further did you go because you were focusing on that one? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And that's a great example, because what we're really talking about in terms of dealing with limiting beliefs is that we want to find a way to work through them. And one of the best ways to work through them is to focus not on the story, but to focus on the possibility. And what you said exactly is to just walk one step at a time and say, okay, even if you have this limiting belief that says, I can't handle this or I can't do that, what if you were to change your language and say, okay, I'm uncomfortable right now. I think this is going to be challenging. I'm afraid of failure, right? And then go, just like you said, let's see, what can I do? What do I feel comfortable doing? How can I push myself a little bit harder? How can I walk those extra steps? Because that's what actually gets us through, right? So if you have an intention and your intention is to get through this the best way that you can and to improve even a little bit from where you were when you started, then that is a healthy goal to go to. It's also, so this is the other thing about limiting beliefs and about flow, is that sometimes when we set an intention or we set something and it is too high, because sometimes that does happen, is we set some goals and they are unreachable, right? We're kind of dreaming that, yes, we'd like to do this, but it's not going to happen right now. Maybe it's going to happen next year, maybe it's going to happen next month, but it's not going to happen right now. So how can we take that and work with work with it and not see it as a failure and not see it as something that prevents us from trying again. What do you think about that, Gwen?
Oh my God. And again, I'm going to just apply it to this Toronto Miracle, because the thing that was really neat is I don't know how the people came to us last year in the first place, but I know as soon as they sent out the email, it's like, okay. And I signed up to captain. And this other person, my co-captain Tanya, she was on Facebook with me, and she reached out. She goes, oh, I just got an email. And I said, yeah, I've signed up for captain. Do you want to, you know, like, come on out, let's do this. And then she became co-captain, which was great. Well, we started just by getting, I reached out to the people that were involved before. So again, we didn't really know what we're doing. Before that, we lost a number of the people that we had last year, but it was also just as easy. I think the thing is too, when you include other people in your stuff, when we don't believe that others will support us, and I'm throwing this in the mix just for fun, when we think that it's only us and that it's only up to us and we can't count on anybody else, and you might have a life example that maybe showed you that. I think if you can allow people to make their own choices, like all I did was reach out to the people that we were involved with last year. And it's like, hey, are you interested? Yeah, sure. The person, Wolf Electric, who hosted us, she brought in at least 1,000 items on her own with her own contacts. We reached out to everybody in our local community, and it's like, well, can anybody get into the schools? And we got somebody that was on one of the parent councils. So again, last year we didn't do any of this because we also had like a week to do it. There wasn't as much as much time. This time we had a month. And the funny thing is that once you start something, momentum keeps it going. So the other thing is that we have to be able to believe that if we need resources and if we need other things to fall into place, it's like Mike Dooley says, the deadly hows. It's not up to you to figure out how everything is supposed to work. And I think that's where our limiting beliefs really cramp our style, so to speak, right? Is we're trying to fill out the path. Instead, it's just, okay, I'm going to reach out to the people that we had before. Tanya was great because we have a chat, and you want anything done, you give it to a mother with young children. They make more out of an hour than most of us humans. I mean, it blows me away. But there was a teacher situation, like a school situation, and I couldn't speak. She spoke the she was able to take on that communication. I just reached out to everybody that we had from last year, and most of them came back, and most of them said, yeah, let me do this next year. And the thing that touches me most about this kind of thing is, I got it into, like, we have 4 buildings in our condo units. And I just made sure that I had people in each of those buildings. Can you help me do this? They did. And I've had so many people, how did you get it done? I asked. And that's the whole thing here, is that I think, especially with COVID, we think that we're not connected to each other, and we are. And especially in this kind of context where people need help, people love to help. And I think that a lot of times when it comes to limiting beliefs, we don't lean on other people. We don't ask in some cases to say, can you help me? I need help with this. And I think that would be like a really wonderful exercise to just try, is if you have a challenge, asking for help. If you have a challenge, like even this whole interaction started because, hey, it's COVID. Okay, well, let's just talk. Actually, this started out singing, and now it's evolved with us. And I think that we've gotten in some really good conversations. And neither of us, if we put and because I think ignorance is bliss with this, if we had put a parameter on it, like, oh, let's build a program or let's do that we do for our own business, it wouldn't have unfolded as it has. Does that make sense? So a lot of times we've got to get out of the how and really get into why is it that we're doing what we're doing, and where is it that we can ask others to help us.
Yeah, I think that's a great example in the context that you're talking about with the Toronto Miracle and reaching out to people, and in the context of being part of something that's bigger than you are, because people will they like to help, they like to be there. And so putting it out there definitely allows you to get the resources that you need and to bring other people in. And that can happen on a number of different projects, right? So when you have a project, the question isn't, and again, the how does get in our way, because if we're very kind of narrow-minded that this is the way that it needs to be, sometimes that can be off-putting for people. Sometimes it's how we think about it, but we may have tunnel vision. We may not understand that there are other things that could be helpful for us. So the more open we can be in asking for resources, and when you and I talk about this all the time in our coaching work, in our tarot work, and all the things that we do, which is be open to how things are going to unfold and not be attached to the outcome of this is like, it has to happen this way. Because sometimes if we allow things to unfold, they happen even better than we anticipated that they would, right? Now, take the limiting beliefs and apply them to the kind of situations that we're talking about with dealing with family and dealing with, you know, relational issues that are longstanding and that are stuck and so on. This is another place where you can use your intention about how you're going to come to something and be able to really ground into that. You may or may not see movement on the other end. You may or may not see some kind of shift in someone else's behavior. But if you're grounded, if you're really rooted in what your intention is, so you decide, okay, this instead of saying, I can't handle so and so, I'm not going to talk to them at this event, whatever event you're going to. You say, okay, I'm going with the intention that I can probably have a very short, civil, kind conversation with this person that's going to last maybe 2 minutes. I'm going to ask my partner, so asking for help, I'm going to ask my partner to come with me, and I'm going to say, listen, at about 2 or 3 minutes, why don't you say we should go say hi to somebody else, right? And help me navigate the situation, right? Because what you want to do is you want to get in the habit of being able to navigate the situations, build up your confidence, build up your strength, so that you can tackle those things on your own. So you can take those little steps. Maybe this year it's 2 minutes, maybe next year it's 5 minutes, maybe the year after you can actually have a half an hour conversation. It's all about what your intention is to come to any kind of situation in that way. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I agree with that. And sometimes, I had, some challenging family. We all do, because we're all human.
We all do.
And
Yep.
I think that the big thing, exactly as you said, even if you could, like, one of my intentions quite literally years ago was, I'm part of a loving, supportive family. That was my intention. It wasn't the reality in the slightest, but that was my intention. And so with that being said, when there were those messy conversations, I didn't back away from them. I actually embraced them. And it's like, oh, blah, blah. Because in certain situations, I mean, I would be blamed for, the sun coming up and the moon coming up and whatever. And that's fine, because that's other people's, we're all in this party together. We don't have to be best friends with everybody. But if I really wanted to be part of something bigger, I needed to be able to demonstrate that that was my intention. And there were a couple of conversations that weren't pleasant, where, things were said. And even through the tears, I just said, I want to be, I want to have a conversation. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. And that probably took like a couple of years until it got to a place where it's like, okay, then let's start having, sibling on sibling. Let's go out and do something where we have something in common, where you can, because that can't always happen. But it's like, again, what is your intention? Now on the other side, there are familial situations where people are just not healthy to be around. But I think there has to be, is it because there's a history there, as you said, where that you don't get along with this person, or there's, this person maybe has a few too many drinks at Christmas, or this person always has a political view that's different than mine. So then maybe talk about familial, like, you know, Maxwell clan is my mother's side. So we can talk about that. The Lamberts are, you know, my father's side. So you can have, you know, memories that you can bring into the fold, whatever it is. Because there is more that joins us than doesn't. But in families, when we have so much scar tissue, sometimes it's important to say, okay, to get past the scar tissue, somebody's got to cut it up. And am I willing to be that person? And do I have the energy to do that? So those would be the kinds of questions that I would ask, because it's not easy. Like, life is messy, and it's very seldom that we, as grown adult children, actually sit down and go, hey, what was our life? What was your life like growing up in this family? What was your life? And actually having like an honest conversation. That is, if there was turmoil, you know, even if there wasn't, we can all grow up in the same place and have completely different experiences, right? And completely different mindsets and completely different, you know, and sometimes that takes an outsider to bring, you know, to bring light onto that. So again, it's getting help. But I think especially with familial, like, we're coming up into, you know, times that are also sad, because there's people that are missing people. There's, you know, parents that are no longer with us. And so that tends to maybe fray the family. Well, it's up to us to choose what family means once the matriarch and patriarch are no longer there. You know, I mean, if I look at my family, I'm like the matriarch now. There's like, I'm the oldest female, which is sort of scary, because I was never that old. Now I'm finally fitting into the Gwenda name. You know, I'm finally old enough. I hope that makes sense. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you touched on in there. And I think that some of the really important things were that that sometimes conversations do get messy, and sometimes they need to be had. And I think the thing is, where are you in your process of dealing with everything that happens with your family and with people in your family who you might have challenging relationships with? Where are you in that process? Because if you're somebody who has not had a chance to process a relationship with someone, a sibling, a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, and you get into a conversation there, you may not want to have a conversation that is non-productive. You may not want to have a conversation that falls into the same old blame, the same old arguments, the same old, like, maybe that's not the conversation you want to have. So you also want to decide if that person is going to be there, if there's a possibility that I'm going to have a conversation. I need to process my stuff first, so that whatever happens, I can still follow through on my intention when I'm having that conversation. Because if you're not ready to have that conversation, you're not going to be able to follow through on your intention. It's very easy. And I can say this from my own experience: when I haven't been rooted in my intention, when I haven't processed my emotions, when I get into it in a difficult situation, then I'm not at my best. And that can get messy. And sometimes it can cause more problems to go into it that way. So it's really understanding, like, a lot of us are on autopilot. A lot of us are functioning on autopilot in relationships. And so the same things, it's like you're that little ball in a pinball machine. You just keep going around and around and hitting hitting the walls and hitting the bumpers. And then you always end up just going down the little hole until somebody puts you back in and then shoots you out again, right? And you don't want that. You want to be mindful. You want to be purposeful. You want to actually be intentional about how you're having your engagements and how you're having your interactions, and what the result of that is that you want. And if you're looking for things to get better, if you're looking for things to heal, if you're looking for an opportunity to try and connect with someone or interact with someone in a different way, that means taking that time to process what your experience is, with the understanding that, like Gwenda, like you said, that somebody else had a different experience. How do you honor yourself, and how do you honor them without it turning into a fight, right? And if you are not able to do that, what is the kindest way that you can interact with them on a shorter basis? And then think about, do I want to make that engagement or not? Also, we have all gone through pandemic. We have all gone through a lot of stuff. If you don't have the bandwidth to do it right now, that's okay too. Don't beat yourself up about it. Do what you can. Take that time, do the self-care, connect with yourself, and then come back to it when you need to, right? So it's this is not about right or wrong. This is not about this is the only way.
Mm-hmm.
This is about how do I come to this in a way that honors me, honors the other person, is self-caring, and allows me to really honor my intention for this relationship and this interaction.
Absolutely. And I do have something to, this is like the cherry on top. And this is something that I learned myself, and I learned more about why you don't do it recently. And that is forgiving people.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, especially in the family, there was a family situation, or there was a situation I was having with a family member, and more than almost 20 years ago now, I decided I'd forgive them. And there's a couple of things when it comes to forgiveness, right? Like, first of all, you know, forgiveness doesn't mean that what anybody has done is proper or right. But here's the key. When you're forgiving somebody to their face, it's not a good idea, because they may not see that their behavior is worthy of any kind of forgiveness. And what happens there is all of a sudden you're backed into a corner. So somebody comes up, oh, I forgive you for doing that. And you're like, well, I don't see that there was anything wrong with that, or my ideals or my values or whatever it is. I was totally aligned with what I believe I did there. So while that sounds, there's a lot of talk about that. I know there's not a term called toxic forgiveness, but you know, maybe we can start throwing that around too. Is that, you know, a lot of times there's three things that go on in a situation. There's our story, their story, and what's really happening, because it's a blend of both. But it's also when we take out that emotional component, as you said, process your stuff. Even when it comes to forgiveness, you can put that on paper. You can even say it out loud, but it's not recommended to forgive somebody, even if it's a heinous act, no matter what it is, unless that person is part of that conversation. Like, in other words, dialed into having that conversation, they're you know, a responsive part of that conversation, then it might be different. But if you're thinking it's doing a good thing, oh, I'm going to forgive my sister for doing that thing, don't say it to her. She still may not be able to see it in the same light you do. And so this is something that I think is always interesting, right? Is that, you know, family dynamics, it's never just one thing. It can be, you know, I'm looking at it as an older sister, because I've always been an oldest sister. I've always been the one that sticks up for my little sisters. My little sisters may not, you know, I can remember the time my little sister told me, I don't want to be called your baby sister anymore. It's like, what do you mean? So that's just an example of, you know, we're adults now. Even though you may be my baby sister, that's not what you want to be referred to as an adult person. So I won't introduce you as my baby sister. You're my little sister, right? Or even now we just say my sister. But this is just an example of it's really hard to step out of our birthplace responsibilities, because even as the youngest child, you're never going to understand what the oldest child went through to break in the parents, or, you know, anyways, that's just a joke in our family. You know, the fact that the firstborn kid, there's 90,000 pictures. And by the time you get to the fourth, maybe there's 4. That's, you know, hopefully there's more than that. But on the next side of it is like, the reality is you're now parents of 4 kids, you know? So that's just something to keep in mind, that when we are having our conversations, if at all, you can, you know, again, the clear communication that you've been talking about, Ayesha, and anybody that's interested in learning more about that stuff, Ayesha's the woman. I'm telling you, she's amazing. But to be able to use our words and take the emotional component. So write out what you want to say, then come back to it with a hat of like, if I'm looking at this for somebody else, how do I make it so it's not emotional? But on the other hand, keep in mind, especially with familial situations, there's always going to be some form of emotion. So you may want to deliver it in the best way possible. But as you said, if your sibling or your cousin isn't still over what happened in the 6th grade, you're never going to have a fruitful conversation. So maybe you can get to a place where you either accept that, well, they're still back on the 6th grade. Okay, then what can we talk about now? So instead of cleaning that up, is there something we can do like play kerplunk? Or can we get a euchre tournament going? Can we do something that's innocuous that's done so that we can at least enjoy our time together as family? Because, there will come a time where we don't have that, right? So it's important to be able to really be honest with ourselves on where there is irreparable damage, and then make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Or is it just the bunch of us need to have, one of those, a screaming match and clear the air? And even if the Christmas table is not the place to do that, so maybe see if you can get like a family therapy session, or even just, understand that we all process things differently. We all come to things differently, and to keep that again and get the hows out of the way. If your intention is to be part of a loving, supportive family, that was my intention. And it worked for like most of my family, I have to say. And so that was really good, but that took work on my part, and that took intention on my part. And that took taking a couple of blows, because you may not see me the way I see me, but you're also, I need to be able to validate that your experience is your experience as well. Is that too convoluted, or does that make sense?
No, it does. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that, again, a lot of good things that you've brought up in your ad there is around how we make those engagements. So one thing to remember is that in any situation, if we are really being respectful and mindful of communication, is that all that we can actually do in a situation is offer. That's really all we can do, is we can offer, we can make an offer. Can we talk about this at another time? Can we have this conversation? I'd really like to know how you're feeling, what you're thinking. Is there a possibility that we can have this conversation, right? So all you can do is offer. And there may or may not be situations where people are willing to do things like go to therapy or get outside intervention. What you can do is you can make that offer. And if they're willing to, that's great. And if they're not willing to, that's also fine. So it's getting out of the adversarial positioning. When we position ourselves adversarially to somebody, that means that we're either going to be fault finding, we're going to be blaming, we're going to demand to be right in situations, and it's getting ourselves out of that adversarial positioning and saying, okay, what am I actually doing here? If the goal of my having a conversation with this person is to be able to just engage them on a kind level when we're in family gatherings, then regardless of what they say, and that's not to say that you need to take any kind of abusive behavior from anyone, but regardless of what they say, you have the opportunity to say, okay, thanks very much for your input. I'll take that into consideration. Or, I don't feel that that's something that I really want to talk about, or something to that effect. Or, why don't we save that for another day? Hey, do you want to play kerplunk? Something like that, right? You're not being evasive necessarily, but you also want to be honest, and you want to take responsibility for how you feel. So if you're not comfortable, just say, it's not a conversation I'm ready to have, or I'm not comfortable having this conversation. Be honest. Always be honest, but in addition to being honest, be kind, because you don't have to continue. And the more we come into, the more our mindset, if our mindset is, I don't get along with this person, it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, we're bringing that negativity into the interaction. We're bringing that negative energy into the interaction before we even get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not going to have a positive outcome. It's not going to even have a civil outcome, because you're already coming in there with that negativity. So when you process your emotions and you get rid of the negativity, or as much of the negativity as you can, then you have this opportunity to go in there and have an engagement that is a little more balanced and a little more kind. Also, what you said about forgiveness, very important. Forgiveness is not for other people. Forgiveness is for us. It's just for us. It's for us to be able to unburden our hearts, to be able to clear our hearts, and to be able to be with people, the people that we choose to be with, right? Depending on what it is that was the interaction that you feel that you want to forgive, right? Uh, it's only for us. So so it's not something that we need to tell anybody, because again, that puts us in that adversarial position, right?
Perfect. Exactly. Well, and again, a wonderful talk, because I know this is a time that's can be fraught with
Yep.
interactions, which is why, like the Family Stone, I love that movie, but there's always craziness, and it always comes at Christmas, right? Or holidays.
Any kind of holiday or celebration, or weddings and funerals, right?
Exactly, because because everybody's there. Sometimes there's alcohol involved, doesn't make it any easier, but I mean, the bigger thing is when we can respect each other and be kind to each other, even if there's a difference of opinion, as long as we're all on the same page of being respectful and kind, that's going to get you miles ahead of anything else, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And as you say, clean up your own side of the sidewalk first, right? So
you got to do it.
You got to do it. And now for next week, we are going to be, and this is the interesting part, because we're going to be talking about how limiting beliefs of others affect us.
That's
right. So this week has been all about, we have our limiting beliefs and how do we interact with them. But I think this is a really juicy topic, because when we believe that somebody else has, or we know that somebody else has an opinion of me of us that may or may not be right, how does that stunt how you show up, right? And how does that, you're letting somebody else put the chains on. So I'm really excited about talking about this next week. And but we're going to try something new for next week. We're going to show up at 4. So we hope to see you all at 4 next Sunday. Right. And so we're going to try, because again, as you see, I barely can move with all this pain, and it's like, and you know what, by Sunday night I hope everybody's sort of chilling and taking it easy. So
exactly.
But thanks for again the chat, Ayesha. Love it. It was again.
Thank you. Love you as always.
The word whisperer, right? She takes all the words and puts them succinctly, clarity, all that stuff.
Love
and
you,
that's
honey.
Why we just talk. It's two sides of the same conversation.
That's right. That's right. And Gwenda, you hold that space. You hold that safe space. That you give that love. You give that respect, and that's why you're so good at what you do, being the grief recovery specialist. And honestly, I can't say enough. If you need the help, this is the woman to do it for you.
Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you. Free plug.
100%, babe.
Okay. Yes. Love you. And we'll see you guys next week, 4 o'clock.
See you next week, 4 o'clock early.
Okay.
Bye.